Hi, my name is Bruce Bolger, and I'm founder of the Enterprise Engagement Alliance. And we're here today to talk about essentials and recognition. Recognition is one of the most widely practiced tactics in business, but I think after this discussion, many of you will think that it should be taken more seriously than many companies take it. And we're lucky to have people at the front lines of what's going on in recognition, starting with Kylie Green. She's Senior Vice President of Global Sales of Reward Gateway, and they've been a leading international proponent of a strategic approach to engagement in a technology platform. And then we have Dr. Paul White, President of Appreciation at Work, and he comes at recognition from a very different approach. He comes at it from the approach of the one-to-one uh, uh, between manager and employees and really understanding the languages of appreciation. He's written a best-selling book about the 5 languages of appreciation at work. And then we have Tom Short, and his company is really one of the very early developers of online recognition technology. In fact, I knew him when he first started out back in about, well, 2012, I think it was, Tom.
That's right. That's where we met.
So we have a perspective of 3 different people at the front lines of the recognition field. So thank you very much. And before we get started, I just always like to thank the organizations that help support all of our education activities, which are free due to the generous support of our sponsors. So thank you very much. Uh, so first off, Kylie, I'd like to start with you. Your company is one of the early private equity funded companies. There's some big money behind you. You've just recently got a new private equity partner. Where do you see recognition in its maturity scale worldwide? Is it a mature business, or do you think it's a game for big growth and disruption?
Thanks, Bruce. Well, thank you firstly for having me, and apologies. We have been having social happy hours with the team, so I know that a lot of people think the teams from Australia are sitting in bars all the time with our lifestyle, but definitely the background is part of our recent connections. But from what we've seen really interesting development in the recognition space. And yes, as you mentioned, we've just started a new chapter of our business, so we're really excited to partner with Abri and Castic for the next chapter of growth. And one of the things I think that's particularly interesting we've seen is a change in the market as people are moving towards a new phase of recognition. There's been a lot greater focus on organizations that are really looking at how they can provide true moments of connection with their employees. So a move away from what we'd seen with organizations that are focused on service milestones or other tools where they're providing trinkets for employees as sort of expected, instead moving to ways that they can focus on how they can connect with employees on their mission, how they can connect with employees on their purpose, and how they can positively reinforce behaviors that they want to see repeated. And really what we're seeing is organizations are looking for consistent moments to be able to recognize that. And we're also seeing a move towards greater authenticity and greater transparency in recognition and reward moments. And so I think that's creating quite an evolution in the industry and quite an opportunity to disrupt what I guess was a more traditional phase of recognition and reward and create a new era. And I think that's been accelerated with the past 15 months with the pandemic, as organizations have had a greater focus on how do they connect with their employees and how do they reinforce with what is potentially a remote workforce behaviors that they'd like to see repeated and shine a spotlight on the difference between good and great. So I think it's provided great opportunities for integrated learning and development tools and how you can seamlessly recognize people in the flow of their everyday work. So it's only enhanced and accelerated that journey from our end.
Tom, thank you. And Tom, again, I'm going to you before I go to Paul, because you're also a technology platform, as is Rewards Gateway. Uh, how are you seeing? I know that when you guys started, you really believed in the potential of technology to disrupt recognition, and it did to a degree with social recognition. But I think that still most recognition programs are still weighted in the length of service, the traditional.
Yes.
Are you seeing that same shift that Kylie is talking about of really moving recognition up the value chain and have it being a serious reinforcer of the culture, or is it still mostly length of service and that type of thing?
Yeah, we are seeing a pretty significant movement, and it's actually been accelerating since 2012 when we first met many years ago. We were a bit ahead of the curve, and Reward Gateway was out there too, doing many of the right things with a great technology. And what we're seeing is people migrating at a quicker pace now from traditional recognition methodologies, years of service and milestones, with the various type of historical gifts that would be accompanying that, to more of a modern recognition program where they're using technology in a consumer-centric way to connect, communicate, and celebrate all the good things that are going on in their organizations. Because the Millennial and Z workforce, which is going to make up 75% of the workforce by 2025, has grown up with a phone in their hands, since they were born, and they are more about near power and social connections and equality and inclusion and that sense of belonging. And similar to what you mentioned about vision, mission, and values, if you can reinforce that and focus on recognition and recognizing the behaviors that you want to have more of to get to the success that you're looking for, that's kind of where we're at. And the traditional types of ways of recognizing people is now, gone away a little bit, and we're seeing it accelerate. But that being said, I think it's still an exceptionally huge blue ocean for that opportunity, because only a small fraction of the market has now started to adopt technologies like reward gateways and ours to create a more inclusive, a more equitable, and a more connected workplace using the simple power of recognition.
Well, thank you for that, and we're going to circle back to that in a minute. Paul, you've always have a different perspective. I saw you the one time. I think I liked it on LinkedIn. You had been asked to be a speaker at a conference, and the other people that were speaking were all the people that sell kind of the traditional rec that came out of the rings business, right?
Right.
I don't mean to to disparage anybody, but what business are we in? Selling stuff or selling performance? And I think one of the big gripes that you've had with a traditional approach to recognition is that it was really focused on things and gimmicks and bright, shiny objects. What do you think is necessary to build an appreciation of culture into work? And is technology necessary to do that?
Well, Bruce, thanks for the thought-provoking question. I think as I came into this as a psychologist, and I was consulting with family-owned businesses largely, and so came in sort of the side door and smaller organizations than large corporations. It's been interesting to see that they really do want to connect with their people, like Kylie was mentioning, and especially in the last year and a half or so with the pandemic, that and people working from home, that how do you stay connected with remote workers or even in a hybrid workforce? And we found that historically, from my perspective, and not having worked as much with really large corporations, it was more about performance. And I really thought we had sort of moved from the service, years of service kind of thing. I hope we're done with that as a focus, because my gosh, how motivating is that? But anyway, even performance is a good thing in recognition for that, but we really sort of go beyond that. And I think our focus is being received well, of that employees are not just work units. They're not just producers. We're all people, and we have lives. And I think this last year has emphasized that our lives, impact our work life. And so we really focus on appreciating the person. It can include performance, but it can go beyond that, because we're not always at our top performance. We have life issues that interfere. And we also have people that aren't top performers, and that we want to be able to sort of support and encourage them to grow. And so we've, felt like we need to get beyond, the gift kinds of things. And we've actually found that less than 10% of people really want that as the primary way to be shown recognition or appreciation. But I think there's clearly a key aspect of technology, and we've seen that in the peer-to-peer recognition movement. It can still become a bit gamey for the way it's set up for some, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, the issue is being authentic and having a personal relationship. we've come to believe that, you can recognize performance, but to really appreciate somebody, you have to have a relationship. It's really weird to try to appreciate somebody you don't know. It's weird on both ends. And so I think there's clearly a role for technology, but it needs to be done in a personal kind of way.
Well, we're going to get back to that, because one of the things I've always found interesting about your approach, Paul, I've usually been a proponent and believer that it all starts from the CEO, and that if you don't have a CEO establishing a clear culture, you're never going to get the full impact. And one of the things about your technique that we'll circle back to is I think you'd agree that that's true, but that a manager within her own department can create a culture of appreciation, even with a lousy boss. And we'll get back to that.
Yeah.
Kylie, um, again, you've been in the business a number of years, probably longer than you look. And so my question to be, are you seeing, my assessment of recognition up until now is that it's a low level, it's very often a very low level position in the company. It's done because we did it before. The person, I'm not asking about your clients. I'm not asking you to talk about I'm talking about business in general, not your clients. That it's generally the CEO is not that involved, and that it's been kind of a lazy, sleepy industry. Would you agree that that was the past characterization? And do you see that there's a real potential for it to get energized because of not only the pandemic, but because of the whole push toward human capital management?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. Over the last 2 decades that I've been working in this space, it's been very much the realm of HR. So we've been working with chief people officers, chief HR officers that really understand and partner with their managers to understand the importance of recognition, to drive a culture of appreciation and to reinforce the behaviors that they want to see repeated. I think one of the most exciting things for me that's come out of the last 15 or so months is that there's been a shift towards greater executive sponsorship. So not just CEOs, but the entire C-suite actually understanding that employee engagement is a key driver, becoming part of that strategic conversation, being much more invested in the way that they recognize, the way that they connect, that way that they drive that culture of recognition. So it becomes much more from the values that you see as posters up on the wall. And I think part of that was the digitalization that needed to happen as employees moved to remote. So there wasn't that sort of, once a quarter town hall event where you could do the employee shout outs anymore, where everyone came together. But I also think there was a greater recognition on the fact that employees were reevaluating the world of work and the way that they connected. And I think that there is an opportunity to work out how do they drive a greater connection to what might be quite a fast moving strategic goals. Employee sentiment was moving really, really quickly. We saw in May of last year, Gallup had a record high. By June, it was a 20-year low on employee engagement scores. It absolutely crashed. And you see the world of the work that transformed and the reaction from that, and organizations realized that we do need to have a greater focus on how do we connect and engage our employees to drive the rebound that businesses are looking to have sort of post-pandemic. So I think there's a great opportunity for a new phase of evolution. And one of the things that's most exciting for me is that there is now that greater executive sponsorship, particularly with companies that are more innovative. And we've been partnering and seeing a lot of organizations that are really heading in that direction to get their executives involved, whether that is CEOs that are doing opportunities to create recognition moments directly, or people that are using technologies like Tom's business at Kudos and reward gateways and others in the market to be able to find moments where you can continuously and frequently recognize people that might be living your mission, purpose, or values, or where you can keep your finger on the pulse of fast-moving employee sentiment. There is greater executive sponsorship, and that for me is only a good thing to drive the change that we've seen. It's been happening incrementally particularly over the last 5 years, but I think this has absolutely accelerated that progression as well.
Tom, I'm reminded of a television show that was popular in the States about 5 years ago called Mad Men. And I think it got broadcast in your countries. And in that role, Draper, I think it's Dan Draper or whatever his name was.
Draper, yep.
Okay. When he spoke, everybody listened because he was defining the brand. And he was actually involved and Joan, his sidekick, right? They were involved in helping companies define their brand, and they would actually challenge their clients. They would say, "No, you're wrong." Excuse me, don't mean to shout. You're wrong. And do you think that we can see a day where the three of you, are sitting in the C-suite helping companies define their brand and culture and really implementing a strategy that that strategically pushes out that culture all the way out to the front line with clear metrics and measures? We're not there now. Do you see any, unless you disagree, tell me if you disagree.
No, you're going in the right direction, because really where the C-level is going to be more astounded with and moving quicker to products like Reward Gateway and ours is it's the metrics that you gather, because you're gathering everything in real time and you're reaching everybody, creating this open, transparent system where everyone is recognizing one another. It's almost like a 360 feedback. And so you really do, instead of doing pulse surveys, you're getting the pulse of the organization based on the recognition flow that's happening within the organization. And then that's feeding an insights engine on how people are living the vision, mission, and values, and what core qualities or behaviors they're demonstrating on a regular basis, where they're contributing, who they're connected to, and how they're driving the business forward. And once you see all that in the analytics package, you'll understand right away who your high potentials are, which managers might need support and training and to help them elevate and lift the performance of their particular groups. So although our systems are designed around recognition and communication and supporting the organization, even nowadays with COVID, wellness is a key thing that's on the mind of every CEO. Are my people okay? And wellness directly relates to resiliency, and products like ours help build a more resilient individual, connecting them in a remote way that lets them know that their work is valued, their contributions matter, and that they're also working towards something meaningful and purposeful that is in alignment with the core values of the company. But all of that is coming back into an insights engine, because we used to be working in hindsight, like every 6 months or a year, you're doing a performance review with somebody. Now we're having insight moments where we can see it happen in real time. And eventually with the technology, we'll get to a foresight scenario where we will be able to predict what's happening. And if you can't measure it, the C-level doesn't care about it. If you can measure it, now it's real. The whole platform, the whole marketplace is moving into a brand new area where it's going to become essential as an operating part of every business.
And that's really what's critical. The human capital analytics that can come out of these these technologies. We just had an article written by a doctor who's very interested in human capital, and he said he believes employee engagement applications can transform performance appraisals, because performance appraisals, he believes, are based on really very subjective data. They have recency bias. What did you do for me yesterday? Whereas, the technology that comes out, the data that comes out of your technology can be broken out by gender, age, ethnicity, etc. Paul, one of the things I think we would all agree that technology can only get you so far.
Right.
And it can automate a lot of things. You can give you great analytics, but without leadership and without the human touch, can technology really work? So I'm going to turn this into a question. Whereas Tom's and Kylie's businesses, I think, would be pretty much competitors, and that's why I like to have different great companies on these shows so people get to meet different people. In your case, you're a little different, and you actually work in a complementary way with technology, because don't we, beyond the technology, if we don't have that one-to-one connection, we're not really solving the problem. How do you see the one-to-one connection, and how does an organization like yours address that?
Well, I think you're right, Bruce, in that our focus is on person-to-person communication, and that can include groups and it could be organizational. But one of the cool things about sort of appreciation that's outside of performance is that it can flow in any direction, right? I mean, it can be from a receptionist to a manager or to a vice president. It can be from somebody in accounting to somebody in IT that helped them out to solve, a computer problem. It can be even to, to other areas and even suppliers and vendors and that kind of stuff. And so, but it is the personal level. And that's one of the challenges. I mean, we find that for appreciation to be really impactful, it needs to have some core factors. It needs to be individualized and personalized. It needs to be about the person and about what you've seen and what you value about them, whether that's a character quality of, dependability, or maybe their sense of humor. It can be about performance as well. It needs to be communicated in the way that's meaningful to the recipient. And I think that's a big step that we have to get towards to help leaders understand that just because you like to be praised in front of other people doesn't mean that other people do. We found that about 45% of the workforce don't want to be praised in front of somebody else, and it actually becomes a negative. So if you do go that direction, you're actually creating problems. So that's where we use the 5 languages of appreciation to help identify not only the language, whether that's words or quality time or acts of service, but the specific action that's meaningful. One of the changes across generations is that in the past, when people wanted time with somebody, they wanted time with their manager or supervisor, sort of be able to, they valued that more and more among younger employees. I tell people if one of your colleague or team members has quality time, it doesn't mean they want time with you. It means that they want to hang out with their friends and go out afterwards. And so we help identify that. And so it really is about personalization, which leads to the perception of authenticity. And we sort of preach that the more specific you can be about what you value about a person and what they've done, as well as match it with the action that's important to them, then it's perceived as authentic, as opposed to sort of just a generic mechanization of the process.
Yeah, I've seen some technologies that have an automated components to recognition. I go, whoa. Authenticity is, really critical. Kylie, to get to the C-suite, we really have to, and Tom alluded to this, we really have to be addressing core problems that are measurable. What types of issues that are measurable to a CEO do you think an effective CEO-led or management-led or uh, a recognition strategy can achieve in terms of clear metrics and benefits to the organization?
There's definitely a focus on those core business metrics around employee engagement scores, around customer satisfaction scores like NPS. There's obviously impact on staff turnover that people are looking at. But I also think in addition to that, organizations are looking at some of the softer metrics. So they're looking at how are they creating moments of culture and connection? So how are they creating moments when the employees are connected within the business? What anecdotal feedback are they getting from employees as well? So there's a mixture of all of those that come together. And I think a lot of it is how are they helping to drive connection to the organization, to its values, to its purpose, to its strategic objectives, and how are they helping support their employees in being able to deliver that so that they can provide high levels of employee engagement and ultimately high levels of customer satisfaction, because we know how closely linked those two are. So I think they're the main things that people are looking. A lot of them are indicating factors that lead towards it, but they're the key things that people are trying to measure from the C-suite and see how they can help move the needle on that by creating more moments where there is greater visibility, greater awareness, and greater adoption of tools that are helping them drive their employees and support their employees to feel more connected and to understand that they're making meaningful progress against that mission, against that they are living those values and that they are driving that forward. And I think more than ever, it starts with the indicating factors that you can say to an employee, I see you and I appreciate what you do. And I think once you can achieve that, then you can link into those broader impacting factors that the C-suite care about. Employee engagement scores, customer satisfaction scores, NPS scores, turnover rates, and all those other factors there too.
Tom, do you see more companies looking more seriously at human capital metrics and really asking you for reports and indications that could be prescriptive as to ways to reduce turnover, to increase willingness to recommend, et cetera? Do you see more push on that coming from a higher levels?
Yeah, they're definitely starting to take action on the insights that they're gaining from the tools that we provide. So typically it starts off with the very fundamental items of they just want people to use it. So participation, activation and participation are the two most important factors at the beginning. And once you get activation and participation, we start looking at reach. Are we getting to everyone? Much like what Paul mentioned, a lot of people we've seen in our system that would be more introverted actually use our product more than extroverted people, just due to it's a more comfortable way for them to interact with one another. And even now that we're seeing 90% of the market remote in this scenario, it is about how do you connect all these individuals. But once you look at activation, participation, and reach, then you are looking at movements in things like net promoter scores and employee net promoter scores, in addition to customer satisfaction. They're closely tied, which then dives directly into retention and even recruitment costs, because we can also see how we can create a better culture that's more attractive in a highly competitive marketplace. Almost everyone we talk to now, and COVID, let the genie out of the bottle here, is you don't need to live in Sydney to work in Calgary, or you don't have to work where you live anymore. The best people are being picked up all over the world and working together now. And it's a competition for talent like you've never seen before. And you have to, the only thing that differentiates people from the widgets that we create is the cultures that we create. And if you're a great company that cares about your employees and have tight alignment with your employees and team members as to what you stand for and what you're trying to achieve, like our little motto of changing the world one thank you at a time resonates unbelievable with our staff. And living that credo and that mission to really make a difference in the world with a simple tool, it brings great people to us because they want to work for a company like that. And and then once you get into some of the other scores like retention, recruitment, your Glassdoor ratings, things like that, you can affect so many different things. But then you have to draw the line as to how does that actually impact the bottom line. That's a little bit more difficult because what we do is just one lever amongst many tools in a greater universe of a strategic program that is designed to drive the business forward. But where I think recognition is one of the more essential things that people have sometimes overlooked, they'll rush ahead to go get a survey, or they'll rush ahead to go get a performance, or they'll rush ahead to get learning and development. But until you have a foundation of that's culture focused and has feedback loops through recognition, like sure, put in a learning development system eventually, but once they might finish their micro credential or whatever they've done, recognition comes into play. Health and wellness, run a health and wellness program, that's great, but don't do that before you have a recognition program to thank them for participating in that health and wellness activity. And in the performance item that Paul mentioned, we need to make sure that we're giving constant feedback in micro doses to drive that forward, and use strategic recognition where you're very specific, you're very timely, and you tie it back to goals or values in a way that is memorable. And then you're capturing that information in real time that the employee and the company can use to measure our progress as we strive to become better people and better employees. So there's so many different things that are going on, and it's an exciting time. And we're still trying to make sure that organizations out there see that we're not the second or third product you put into your tech stack. We should be your first or second product that you put into your tech stack, and then build everything else on top of that.
So, Paul, one of the things that you as a professional, I would imagine, has been battling in this whole field is getting out of the warm and fuzzy.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, I don't think anybody wants to be in the warm and fuzzy part. And so tell me, and I'm going to give Kylie and Tom an opportunity to answer the question, what do you think is the essential element? If you're giving advice to a friend who's considering a recognition strategy, what advice would you give him or her for their key considerations. And then Kylie and Tom, to the extent that he didn't offer advice that you think is good, fill in after that. Go, Dr. White.
So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I do battle the warms and fuzzies. In fact, just finished a presentation where address misconceptions that leaders have about appreciation. And one of the things I hit right on is that the goal of appreciation is not to make people feel good. And I really, I'm glad nobody here's from California, because I have negative feelings towards some of the HR people out there that, want to make people happy, and that's sort of an individual choice. And what we then tie to are the kinds of things that Kylie and Tom have been talking about having measurable outcomes that impact the business. Really, the goal of appreciation, and I think recognition as well, is to have a well-functioning organization. And Bruce, that the research shows clearly that when team members are engaged and feel valued, they produce more, and there's greater profitability than those that don't. That's the whole, sort of SEC kind of movement that's going on with human capital development. And, the core about that is it's got to be about them as a person, and it's got to be perceived as genuine. And that's when I travel around and speak and interact with both frontline leaders, supervisors, managers. There's one of the biggest problems with a lot of recognition programs is they're viewed as just disingenuousness, and it leads to sarcasm and cynicism and, just a lack of trust. So there's got to be a personal element to it. I mean, I think the technology part is key that can help drive that. But if you, sort of focus solely on technology and don't understand the relational part of it, between people, persons, employees, you're going to miss the boat and just sort of, wind up in the ditch.
Well, I'll wind up with another bright, shiny object.
There you go.
Kylie, your advice to your cousin. She calls you up. I run a company. I've got some vendor trying to sell me in a recognition program. What's your advice to her?
Yeah, I think one of the things is to think about, and this is certainly something Paul's just touched on, how do you make it authentic? How do you create a meaningful recognition or reward moment? And I think that's one of the things that's really, really important throughout the process. So having authenticity is important. And I think that part of that is also how do you educate and support your people to have a meaningful and an impactful recognition moment. So we talk a lot about action, value, impact. Don't just say a thank you for doing something and people don't understand what it is that they've done. Talk about the action that they have produced, how that links back to your company value or your strategic goal or objective or behaviors that you want to see repeated, and what is the impact of that. So we're going through an education process where, yes, you can use technology to create immediacy, and I do think immediacy is important. Gone are the days where people wanted to wait for once a quarter, once a year, sort of thank you for their contribution. We need to find a continuous opportunity, and that's where technologies like Tom's and Reward Gateways certainly provides that opportunity for that real-time feedback for employees to have continuous, frequent moments where they're recognised when they're heading in the right direction, and their colleagues can join in that opportunity to recognise their contribution. But so I think immediacy, I think authenticity. I think the other thing that's important is flexibility. So organisations, and if the last year has taught us anything, it's that how quickly things can move. So the flexibility that organisations can evolve as their strategic direction changes, as employee sentiment changes, as focus on employee wellbeing changes, that they can evolve and adapt to that fast-moving sentiment. So I've been really inspired by a lot of organisations that move really quickly to have a thank you for colleagues that helped them in the front lines during the pandemic, or that helped thank teams that helped their employees move remotely, and that we're able to connect and recognize and celebrate that quite quickly. So I'd say immediacy, authenticity, and flexibility are some of the three things that I think is quite important. And then also I think transparency would be the last thing, to think about how can you have a really transparent recognition and reward solution that employees are very savvy nowadays. Our millennial employees particularly incredibly savvy. So how can you have something that shows transparency, that shows what you value as an organization, and allows that people can have full transparency of their contribution, and how they can help into the next chapter of the journey. So there'd be some of the key things I think about.
Well, thank you, Kylie. And Tom, anything that she may have left out that you want to add? And then I'm going to ask you all each one quick question and we'll wrap up.
You betcha. No, everything that I'm hearing is very much in alignment with what we believe and what we're seeing out there as well. Having the ability for messages that are teachable moments, that get out there in a transparent way. Because in the old days, I might tell you, thank you, you've done a great job, but the only two people know about it is you and I. And so with the technology, you are creating more empowerment and more trust. And that transparency is essential to create the empowerment and trust. And although getting a message from the CEO or your manager is great, getting a note of appreciation from your coworkers and your teammates is even more powerful. It's even kind of like the reputation economy that's out there. It's all the people who bought the product that give feedback versus the company saying we're great. Has much more power than just the manager giving it. Now, that being said, the programs do have to be led from the C-level and the manager level. If they're not using it, then the rest of the team might kind of go, well, they're not drinking the Kool-Aid here, like what's going on. But you can start and build from the bottom up, even if the C-level and the managers aren't getting into the program, and it can sustain itself for a while. But for products and companies to be really successful, they have to have a philosophy and a psychology of knowing that culture is the killer app, and that tools like Kudos and Reward Gateway just are enablers of that to empower everyone to be a keeper of the culture. And if you focus on that, just like if you take care of your customers, if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers. If you take care of your customers, that'll take care of the business. And engagement and recognition is the essential item to take care of your employees.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have enough time to get into more of the details of how your companies work, and we do have other formats to share that. Paul, and again, what I like about what your company does, Paul, that's kind of different and complementary is that you train people on how to appreciate each other in alignment with the organizational goals, because appreciation for the sake of appreciation is not quite enough. It's
Right.
really appreciating people for the right things. So here's my last quick question for each of you. Um, some of you may be aware the Securities and Exchange Commission in the United States has not only implemented now disclosure requirements for human capital. They're very vague right now, but they recognize that human capital is material. You then have on top of that, the SEC new chairman has stated unequivocally his number one priority is human capital reporting, and he is going to move aggressively, and the entire SEC committee is on his side. There is going to be much more detailed human capital reporting on turnover, diversity, equity, inclusion. Then we have this whole stakeholder capitalism movement, the World Economic Forum, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board has been asked to create formal human capital standards reporting. So there seems to be a great big push on human capital. Paul, and I'm going to ask all three of you quick answers because we're wrapping up. Do you think this is sustainable? This interested in human capital is really real now, and that it's not a fad, or is it a fad? And if it isn't a fad, do you think it can affect the businesses of companies like yours, that companies will realize that they really need your service and it's not just a nice to have?
Bruce, I think it is not a fad, but I don't think it's equally accepted across all businesses, industries, leaders. So I think we're going to see a fallout or distribution of companies and leaders that really get it and go for it. Some that sort of get it and don't want to get left behind and sort of engaged, and then others that don't give a rip about it and are just going to keep doing stuff the way they have been. So, I don't think it's a global shift across all companies. I think that's maybe a bit naive, but I think it's going to be sustainable in hopefully a fairly large group of companies and organizations.
So Kylie, without giving your new owners too much expectation that you're going to quadruple the business in 6 months, what do you think? Do you think this is a fad, or do you think we see a wave building that will help your business?
I think it's an evolution. I agree with Paul. There's definitely an evolution that's taking place. We're seeing a greater focus anyway that's happened for the pandemic. This is only going to continue to accelerate it. But I think it will be the more innovative companies. And I think the companies that will continue to attract talent in a really, as Tom touched on, a really hard and challenging recruitment market. The companies that are focused on this and the more innovative companies are the ones that are going to really separate themselves from the rest of the pack. And then I think the others it will be an evolution that will continue to happen over time.
Paul, you get the last. Tom, I'm sorry, you get the last word.
Yeah, I'll just build on what everyone else is saying. I do think that there will be the early adopters. We're still at the beginning of this transition from the traditional methods to more modern methods. But it's going to accelerate from here. It's beginning to look like a hockey stick curve at this point in time. For the last 10 years, it's been kind of a gradual adoption, and now we're starting to head up this faster adoption, just because the COVID scenario and the remote working has shone a light on this in a way that accelerated everything by a decade. Because it's really, really important now that you have a really great people strategy, because not only is it important for your business, but with the SEC rulings and everything that's going on there too, for funding, for investment, for even other clients buying your business in RFPs, there's going to be information in there requesting, what are you doing about this? And if you're not doing something about it, you're going to lose business, you're going to lose financing, you're going to lose investors. So people will wake up really quickly when it affects their pocketbook.
Well, and that's a great conclusion. And I'm going to just quickly share my screen one time to kind of sum up everything. First off, the Enterprise Engagement Alliance offers a lot of free information. And on our YouTube show, at the bottom of it, you will see the email and names and emails of these three great panelists. And we invite you, and they invite you to, contact them if you have any questions or want to learn more about your business. A very quick summary then of what we've learned today. Recognition is beginning a big shift away from the old length of service and service awards to a much more strategic approach. It's being driven by more human capital analytics and more pressure from employees and customers to do business with companies that care. That effective recognition programs are strategic, that they're aligned to your brand, that they have clear metrics, and that those metrics can be related to turnover, a willingness to recommend, customer satisfaction, and so that there are there's also human capital ROI, human capital value add, which are other measures of people productivity. That for these programs to work, they do not necessarily need to have the support of the C-suite, but they do have to have the support of the manager in a particular department who has a natural understanding of the need for ongoing recognition. Technology can play a major role in this in terms of integrating and aligning the recognition tools, communication, and what people are recognizing each other for, and integrating that with your learning management systems, so that the ability to get great data is incomparable, is really never been possible before. But that again, without a program, without a process, without management really committed to this, the technology won't work. So it's all about commitment, program design, effective technology, and measurement. So thank you, Tom Short of Kudos, Dr. Paul White of Appreciation at Work, Kylie Green of Rewards Gateway. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and we look forward to having you on another show soon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. Much appreciated.
Thank you.